Does anybody else need water? No. Thank you all for coming. This is the immigration panel. We're very excited to be here and excited to have these guests here with us. My name is Mercedes Schlapp. Folks call me Mercy, and have basically been dealing with the immigration issue, as many of these folks have for many years. To start off, I think it's really important to go back to what the ACU chairman Al Cardenas said in an op-ed piece last year. He said that immigration reform takes courage. And it's an issue, obviously, that we see that's very emotional. It's an emotional debate that actually has caused a lot of division amongst Republicans and amongst conservatives. And so this is a wonderful opportunity to be able to talk about the differences that exist, the different positions that exist on this issue, and we have these courageous panelists who are going to try to tackle this issue and come up with the best solution and go right up to Congress. No, they're not, but if they can, just to come up with these different principles and issues that we think are going to be really important to talk about during this time. One thing that we do know about our immigration system is that it's broken. We've seen this when federal government is incredibly intrusive and gets into everybody's business. And they're so inefficient that they can't make things work. And one thing we do know is that they can't get immigration to work, and they haven't been able to do that for decades. So when we deal with this, can we achieve immigration reform without citizenship? We also need to look at the broader picture about those individuals who are in our country right now that are actually helping the economy and helping to grow America. And saying, is it an all or nothing situation when it comes to these individuals who have come to this country legally? And so those are sort of the questions that we need to look at. The economic impacts that immigrants in this country, undocumented immigrants in this country, bring, and how we can figure out a way to help make this broken system work. How can we get to a point that 40% of those that come to this country that have their visas and overstay their visas, how do we stop that from happening? How do we improve our visa system? How do we improve our employment verification system? So again, it's looking at it from all these different perspectives and figuring out a way that we could somehow, some way, come to an agreement, come to a solution, and fix a problem that we've been having for decades. So to get started, I'd like to introduce our fine panelists. We have, to my left, Helen Kriebel, founder and president of the Vernon Kriebel Foundation. It's a private foundation dedicated to the public policy and America's founding principles. She is a noted leader in the national debate on illegal immigration and the author of Two Paths to Safety, a private sector initiative to break the illegal immigration deadlock. Next, we have Derrick Morgan. He is Vice President of Domestic and Economic Policy for the Heritage Foundation. He directs all research on domestic issues, including the work of 4 major policy centers at Heritage: the Rowe Institute for Economic Policy Studies, the DeVos Center for Religion and Civil Society, the Center for Health Policy Studies, and the Center for Data Analysis. Then we have Alfonso Aguilar, Executive Director of Latino Partnership for Conservative Principles. He was a former chief of the U.S. Office of Citizenship under President George W. Bush, and before joining the U.S. Department of Homeland Security in 2003, he served in numerous high-level government positions in the Bush administration and the government of Puerto Rico. And finally, last but not least, Reverend Luis Cortez, Jr., President of Esperanza. He is recognized as a national leader of Hispanic concerns and community development. He founded Esperanza in 1987. He is the board member and founder of United Bank, the first African-American-owned commercial bank in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He was featured as one of Times Magazine's 25 most influential evangelicals in January 2005. Thank you all for being here, and we will get started with some remarks from Helen.
Thank you very much, Mercy, and I'm glad to see everybody who's here. I see a lot of friends, which is nice. There, as you know, has been a lot of discussion about immigration recently, and House Republican leaders announced their principles for reform. But I think those of us who are in this room understand that the debate shouldn't be about Republican principles. It should be about American principles. Our approach to all issues needs to be based on the founding principles of our country, from our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, among which are equal treatment under the law. And I hope as I speak you'll be thinking about the immigration plans that are out there. Equal treatment under the law, limited government, individual freedom, and personal responsibility. The immigration debate recently has polarized into two approaches: citizenship for all people living illegally in the United States, and we all know that that's wrong, or taking no action at all, and that's just as wrong. Both approaches are wrong. Citizenship is a wrong approach because it devalues the very concept of citizenship. Being American isn't about your physical presence. It's understanding and pledging allegiance to our core principles. You can't be an American if you don't understand what that means. And taking no action at all forces us into the trap of Obama's rhetoric about do-nothing Republicans with no ideas who only obstruct progress. And I don't think we should let him define us. There is a third way, and that is through the lens of the founding principles of our country. That is the conservative way. You'll know the right approach when you see it or hear it, if you apply these principles. Our principles need to be the backbone of any legislation on any topic that comes through Congress. You and I should be reminding all Americans that these principles are the bedrock way to evaluate any proposed law. Instead, what we're seeing from Congress on immigration is politics as usual. It's special deals for special groups with the right power structure on both sides of the aisle. Special deals for agriculture workers, for dreamers, for high-tech workers, even cruise ship employees, and in my state of Colorado, ski instructors. It's wrong for Congress to set artificial quotas on the number of workers every business can have. And thereby picking winners and losers. In fact, taking control of the entire labor market, just as we saw government take over the entire healthcare market. And that should frighten you. It is not a principled approach. Instead, let's, as conservatives, lead this debate. Let's base our ideas on American principles, and in fact, this is the third way. It is not outdated, but remains as essential and workable as when these principles were first written. It's a way to remind Americans about the core values which define us. The right approach to immigration reform must be based on these principles. Border control is crucial, and illegal workers ought to be incentivized to come through a gate, not to risk their lives coming across the border illegally or sneaking over a wall. The right guest worker program should be market-based, not government quota-based. It should be implemented by the private sector, not not government bureaucrats. And it should be paid for by user fees, not tax dollars. Hiring and firing workers should be a business matter, not a government program. It should have nothing to do with citizenship, because citizenship and green cards are an entirely separate process, and the Constitution says the government must do that. But work is, as I said, a business matter. Workers should be treated as guests, not as entitled members of a family. They are not second-class citizens because they aren't citizens. When you have a house guest, and I want you to think about this, when you have a house guest, do you immediately put them on your health plan? Or in your will? A house guest? They are guests, not members of your family. They are entitled to work, to be treated well, and not to receive full public benefits. There is a guest worker plan that meets these core American principles and secures the border. A free market private sector proposal called the red card solution. This ought to be the cornerstone of what Congress does on this issue. And if you would like to know about the red card solution, looking at you, I know many of you do know about it, go to our website, redcardsolution.com, or visit our booth here at number 623. The way to defeat bad ideas like the Senate idea is not with no ideas, but with good ideas. Let's be leaders and let's lead. Let's not be muzzled. Let's demand that Congress solve this problem once and for all, not partially over a long time, but all in a way that is consistent with our principles and that will preserve what is exceptional about America. That is the winning strategy. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank CPAC very much for having me on the panel, and thank you, Mercy, for that introduction, and thank you, distinguished panelists as well. Considering our panel is competing with one on pot a couple of rooms down, and there's, I guess, a reception for Donald Trump, I can deduce that you guys are a smart group, and you're a very highbrow group, and you're very concerned with the future of the country, so I want to thank you, too, for being here. I'm sure you've noticed the question we've been asked to discuss. Can there be meaningful immigration reform without citizenship? The question seems to assume that immigration reform must include legalizing those who are here illegally. But that cannot be right. Of course we could improve our immigration system without addressing that most difficult question. And why is it difficult? Well, because granting legal status, or amnesty if you prefer, is bad policy that's unfair, it's costly, and it won't work. It's not fair to those who came to the country through our convoluted, sometimes difficult, immigration system. I think we all know people like this. They're people that respected the rules, and amnesty really sends the wrong message to them. It says, don't even bother. In fact, it's really a slap in the face. We need a legal immigration system that makes it easier to play by the rules, and I think Helen outlined a number of good proposals in that regard. America's most recent legal residents and those waiting in line did things the right way, and it's unfair to reward those who did not do so. And for every one illegal immigrant here, there are 3 of immigrants who are here legally or are waiting in line the right way under the law. Our policies must be fair to all immigrants and not pick out winners and losers. In fact, granting legal status to undocumented immigrants rewards illegal behavior. But amnesty is not just about fairness, it's also about cost. What would the effect of a legalization or an amnesty be on the American taxpayer? We were inspired at Heritage to ask that question in part because of the insight of Milton Friedman, who said that you cannot have both free immigration and a welfare state. So we looked very carefully at all levels of government, local, state, and federal. We calculated all of the taxes paid, and illegal immigrants do pay taxes. And we looked at all the benefits and services to be received. And it shouldn't surprise you that adding millions of people into an already overburdened welfare and retirement system would add trillions of dollars of costs over the lifetime of illegal immigrants. We're talking about trillions of dollars. And that is money that is going to have to be paid by someone, and that someone is you, the American taxpayer. Not only is amnesty unfair and costly to taxpayers, it won't even solve the problem. Congress's nonpartisan budget analysis office actually looked at that Senate bill that was mentioned a moment ago, that according to its proponents had some of the toughest border and interior and workplace enforcement provisions ever in the history of the country. CBO looked at the bill and they said it wouldn't stop illegal immigration. In fact, they found that millions more illegal immigrants would come over the next few decades. That means that even if we passed another painful and divisive amnesty, we would find ourselves back in this same situation again. In fact, the day we pass amnesty, the problem starts over again. We have to realize that what we do today sends signals and creates incentives. And like the pull of gravity, passing an amnesty again will encourage more illegal immigration. If you don't believe me or CBO, then just look at our own experience. In 1986, we had many of these same arguments, and Congress decided to pass an amnesty for about 3 million people, saying it would only do it this one time. And in exchange, there would be border security and workplace enforcement. But here we are again, just a few decades later, and this time we have 11 million illegal immigrants here. I'm quite certain that if we pass amnesty, we'll be having this same debate again before today's high school freshman graduates college. We can't pretend that an amnesty solution will solve our illegal immigration problem, because it won't. Amnesty is clearly the wrong policy, and right now we need to make no mistake. If the House passes legislation of any kind, the Senate will push to include an amnesty. Charles Schumer said it himself, that he just needs a bill that can get to conference, and he'll take it from there. If these weren't reasons enough to oppose immigration bills now, just consider who we are empowering with these new laws. President Obama. Because amnesty is unpopular by itself, policymakers often include other, more popular provisions, and that's what they did in 1986 and what they proposed in 2007 and are proposing now. But even if you think that amnesty is a price you're willing to pay for border security and for workplace enforcement, why on earth would you trust this current administration? President Obama's administration has changed the signature health care law again and again, delaying things like the employer mandate. And setting aside what you think of drug policy, again, the pot panel's a couple of rooms down there, the president said he won't enforce the federal drug laws that states that decriminalize them under state law. He's also made recess appointments when the Senate was in session. He gutted welfare reform. I could go on and on. But one more example would suffice. In the immigration area, DHS announced that it wouldn't enforce the law against so-called dreamers, even though Congress has repeatedly refused to pass the DREAM Act. More broadly, the administration is not enforcing the current laws with respect to immigration. So why would we expect them to enforce any new laws? Doesn't make any sense. That brings us to the question posed. Can there be meaningful reform without citizenship? Generally speaking, immigrants who want to stay here long term should be eligible for citizenship. We should try to live up to the motto on our seal, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. We're a lot stronger when we successfully assimilate new immigrants into a healthy culture of free enterprise and traditional values and the rule of law. You know, a handful of countries have an immigration system like ours, only a handful, that admits permanent residents with a clear path to citizenship. Of those, we admit more than the rest combined, about 1 million every year. We have a very generous immigration system as it is now if we don't do anything. To become citizens, immigrants must pass our naturalization exam. And I did some research to find out the kind of questions that are asked in that exam. The study materials put out by the Citizenship and Immigration Services were quite helpful. Here was one of the study questions. What is the rule of law? Here's the answer. Everyone must follow the law. Leaders must obey the law. Government must obey the law. No one is above the law. I just don't see how we can grant amnesty on one hand, pass laws the president will likely disregard, and then with a straight face still ask our legal immigrants to answer that question. The question before the panel is essentially, can we have immigration reform with just amnesty but not citizenship? In other words, for those who push for immigration reform accept only half a loaf. I'm probably the least well situated on the panel to answer that question, But I will say that some well-meaning conservatives think that legal status is less problematic than citizenship. And it's true that compared to citizenship, legal status is a little bit less unfair, a little less costly, and won't incentivize quite as much illegal immigration. But do we really think that the left is content to stop with only half a loaf? I think it's far more likely that before the ink on President Obama's signature on such a law is dry, that the left will decry the Jim Crow status of these newly legalized immigrants. They will push hard. They will push hard for the whole loaf, and Republicans, having abandoned a principled position, suddenly look stingy and self-interested by denying these likely Democratic voters the franchise. Therefore, I've drawn the conclusion, I think, that the best policy right now, unfortunately and regrettably, is no legislation. It's up to the president to show he'll enforce the law before it makes sense to pass anything. Once we have a president who has demonstrated that he or she will uphold the law, then we can pursue a step-by-step approach to focus where there's widespread agreement. First and foremost, we will restore the integrity of U.S. law and secure the border. And at Heritage, we would favor other reforms like a guest worker program similar to what Helen laid out, and a legal immigration system that's more competitive internationally by encouraging more high-skilled immigration, for example. The key point is that you can move less controversial pieces first and make sure enforcement is working first, and then move to more controversial issues later on. Well, it's vitally important that as we discuss the issue, we do it with respect and civility, and for the reasons I've outlined, I respectfully disagree with the policy of legalization with or without citizenship, and I look forward to hearing your questions in just a little bit. Thank you very much.
Alfonso.
Well, good afternoon to everyone. I want to thank CPAC for this kind invitation. Mercy, thank you for the introduction. When I started working the Bush administration back in 2001, early 2001, my contact at the White House was Mercy Viana, and so it's great to see you again. And we were both only 16 at the time, so but anyway, look, I'm here to tell you that conservatives need to address immigration, and they need to do it now. We cannot wait for a Republican administration. We have to do it now. The American public, and even our conservative and Republican base, wants us to lead and legislate. We have 3 more years for President Obama. What are we going to do? Sit on our hands and just complain? We have to show that we can lead. And we don't have to do it the Obama way. As Helen has very well articulated, we have to own this issue, reclaim this issue, and articulate unique conservative solutions to the issue. Because let me tell you, the problem of illegality, this is why I believe that conservatives can own this issue. The problem of the undocumented community of illegality is the creation of big government policies, of Congress having the audacity to set arbitrary quotas that don't reflect the needs of the market. And this is an issue about freedom of American citizens, that if I own a business, big government is telling me, no, if I'm trying to find American workers, and if you can't find them, no, you can't hire foreign workers. That's big government getting in your way. So are we to stand with big labor that doesn't want to see a guest worker program, that doesn't want to see businesses being able to bring more foreign workers that they need to expand? No. We should stand with Ronald Reagan. We should stand on our conservative principles, not listen to labor, and big government regulating the labor market. Now, some may say, well, they're taking jobs away from Americans. That's just not true. That's not true. In fact, I believe in a guest worker program, and by the way, I must say I'm the biggest fan of Helen Kriebel and the Red Car Solution here. Because at the end, the problem that we have is that immigrants are coming here because we need them. Not because of cheap labor, because we need them. We need them to expand our businesses. And I don't want it just because greedy businesses want cheap labor. No, you know why I want them? Because when they come here, they do jobs that Americans don't want, or jobs or jobs where we can't find Americans of working age to do them. We have a population issue in this country. And it's not that our population is too small, my friends. It's that our population is starting to grow below replacement levels. We need that workforce. And if we don't have that workforce, guess what? We're not going to create jobs, good paying jobs for Americans. So yes, I'm for immigration because it creates good paying jobs for working class Americans. And that's a populist argument. It's not because, yes, it's important for business to get those workers and grow the economy, but I care about creating good jobs for Americans. We cannot wait. To say we're going to do it next year is just to kick the can down the road. Are we going to have the political circumstances, the political environment to get this done? When is it going to be the right time? 2016, 2017? We have to lead. And there are unique conservative ideas. Look, immigrants come here to work. We need them. What happened with the Reagan immigration reform? It didn't have a workable guest worker program. We legalized about 3 million people, but guess what? We needed more workers, and they kept coming in. We didn't have a mechanism to facilitate that flow. After 9/11, we beefed up border security, made it more difficult for them to enter legally, impeding that circular migration that we've always had. So they stay here illegally. I can tell you the majority of them don't want to stay here. They would love to go back to Mexico or Central America, but they can't. Because if they were to go back, they would have to re-enter illegally. Facilitate the flow. Support circular migration. And if they're here as guest worker programs, they're not going to be a burden on the state. And we talk about border security. How can we, and any border security expert, from Secretary Rich to Secretary Chertoff, has said this over and over again, how can we secure the border if we have this magnet called the free market, which is of a growing economy, that needs foreign workers? We have limited assets, and instead of going after drug traffickers, we're going after good people that want to work in our country. By having a guest worker program is also about border security, because it facilitates the legal entry of people who want to work here, while we liberate assets to go after people who want to come here to do harm. Now let me talk about legalization, because there are things that I've said that I profoundly disagree with. You know, when you've been here 20, 30 years, you have kids that have been born here who don't speak Spanish. They may not have papers, but they feel American. For us to talk about the rule of law now, when we disregarded for the past 40 years the rule of law, when businesses who needed foreign workers brought those workers here, they didn't come voluntarily on their own. They came here because they knew there was a job. We disregarded for 30, 40 years the law, and now we want to say, let's enforce the law. Let's do it prospectively, but not retrospectively. To say that people are coming here because of they know they're going to become citizens, or because they know that they're going to get social benefits, I mean, that's just being totally disconnected of the reality of immigration. When you talk to the immigrant communities, you talk to immigrants individually, you realize they're coming here for a better future, for their families. They're coming here to work. That's why you have all these remittances going back to Latin America, because they care about their families. They would like to go back. And that's why they're coming here. I've never seen a woman coming from Jalisco, Mexico, with her child crossing the Texas border saying, my son's going to go to Texas A&M, they're going to pay in-state tuition. That's a fallacy. Those are not magnets. Plus, we need to realize the Mexican population is beginning to decrease again, and soon it will grow again below replacement levels. This idea that all of a sudden we're going to have another wave of Latino immigrants entering the country is just factually incorrect. It can't happen because the Mexicans are not there, or the Central Americans. We have a dysfunctional immigration system that needs to be fixed. And I think that we have the right ideas. It's not about citizenship. For those who've been here for a very long time, let's give them a path to legal status. If they want to become citizens, we're not closing the door to citizenship. They can follow the law. They can follow the law and in the process established by the current law. But the path to citizenship is not absolutely necessary. But at the end, we must lead, because the American public expects us to lead. And for us to say that immigration is the issue of Democrats is a fallacy. We're not going to fix it. Obama's answer to immigration is let's give amnesty, let's legalize. What we're saying is, yes, we're going to have to take care of those who are here undocumented, because guess what? We're not going to be able to deport them home. No. And secondly, self-deportation does not work. Whoever thinks that attrition through enforcement works, it's just not a reality. It's not going to happen. So from a Homeland Security perspective, we have to get these people in the bush. So we need to do it, and we need to do it now. This is a question not of doing what Obama wants, it's about reclaiming the immigration issue. If we're active about a market-based guest worker program like Helen Kriebel's proposing, you know who's going to be the first one to complain? The unions and Obama. That's why Obama always talks about comprehensive reform. He never talks about a guest worker program, because they don't want to see more foreign workers enter the country, because they want to artificially increase wages for workers. That's the truth. You know, I remember talking to Congressman Joe Garcia of Miami, a Democrat, and I asked him, well, what about the foreign workers out there? We don't have a mechanism to bring them in. And he said, well, forget about them. They're outside. The problem is that today they're outside, but tomorrow they'll be in if we need those workers. We need a system that works, and only conservatives can provide the solutions to fix it. It's time to get the courage and be bold and lead. Thank you.
I feel like church in that the first rows are empty, just like in church on Sundays. So, anyway, I want to thank CPAC, Mercy, and my fellow panelists. The question is, can there be meaningful reform without citizenship? And the answer is yes, but it won't benefit the Republican Party. There doesn't need to be a special path to citizenship, a special path for citizenship. We do not want to give automatic green cards to people who have broken the law. But there should be no preclusion for those that want a green card to get back of the line once they've met all legalization requirements. In other words, there needs to be requirements if you want to get legal if you've entered this country illegally. Precluding citizenship will only do two things in the long run. It will create a permanent underclass if they're allowed to stay. And two, it will give Democrats a toehold to continue recruiting Hispanics. It will give Democrats the toehold to continue framing the Republicans as an anti-Hispanic people. Now, I do want to say something about border security, because there's been this idea that Hispanic people want an open border. No one suffers more from a porous border than Hispanic citizens in the United States. Let me say that again. No one suffers more from a messed up, uncontrolled border than Hispanic citizens in the United States. When bad people slip in and hide in this country, they normally don't go to Rodeo Drive. They go to El Barrio. They go to the communities where we live and where our Latino American citizens live. And they go to those communities and they wreak havoc. Imagine if your neighbor is undocumented and he's being abused by a drug gang, and you have a choice. Do I call the police and protect my neighbor? With the understanding that my neighbor will also get deported. May well get deported. So our perspective is that once legal status is attained, and the importance of legal status is, we will be able to define the good from the bad. I want to be very clear. There are two types of undocumented or illegal people in this country. They're the ones who come in here and work hard every day for their boss. And they're the ones who come in here and create small businesses. And then they're the ones who prey on other people. The only way we're going to, I'm going to use a biblical term, wheat and chaff. The only way we're going to know the difference between the wheat and the chaff is when they all have to come forward. Do you know why? The ones that will come forward are the good ones. Bad folks are just not going to come forward. They can't come forward. They don't have a boss that says, yeah, Charlie's been working for me for 8 years or 3 years. They don't have, they can't show that they've been paying rent. They cannot show that their kids have been going to school. So bad people will be caught quicker. We will be able to target our money better if we have a process for legalization. Now, the unions were mentioned. The unions have consistently, we have an immigration problem because of unions in the United States. That's never been, we never talk about it. I don't know why. We just don't seem to talk about it. The Democratic Party and the unions have consistently reduced the number of worker visas we need in the United States. But those jobs still exist, so guess what? People still fill them. So if there are illegal people here in this country, the bulk of them have come legally, 40% of them have come legally and overstayed. The other 60% have come to find jobs. Let's say 55, because there's about 5% of bad guys that we gotta catch. Did you know that in the United States, immigration reform is the only policy matter where God agrees with God? Now, I'm talking to you as a minister, but I want to explain what I mean by that. In the United States, there are no policy matters where the church agrees. Abortion, public spending, the definition of sin, which is a religious matter, we don't even agree on that. So, the Baptists, the Lutheran, the Pentecostal, the Catholics, the Methodists, the Episcopalians, the Muslims, the Mormons, the Hindus, the Jewish community, evangelicals. And if someone is here from Baha'i, I apologize because I don't know your religion, but I do have your statement on immigration. Even the Baha'is, we all believe in immigration reform and the need to change the system and in having to bring people in. In other words, the longer we take, the longer we're taking a stand that is perceived anti-moral by the religious communities of our country, which is the group that has traditionally supported the Republican Party. We have got to begin to see this as a fissure, as a break. If we're not careful, immigration will help break relationships that we've traditionally had as the religious group. You could disagree when you get a chance to ask questions. When I ask churches, do you want your grandchild to be the best dishwasher, fruit picker, grass cutter, or cook in the diner? When I go to churches and ask that question, no one raises their hand. When I ask churches, should the U.S. be the strongest in science and technology, everyone raises their hand. Both of these issues are tied to the need for immigration reform. Do you know that a majority of the Republicans want immigration reform? In 2013, the CBS poll came out, 75% of evangelicals support a path to citizenship. In November 2011, there was an 11-point drop in the percentage of white evangelicals who felt immigrants are a burden. There was a poll of Republican primary voters. 75% self-described themselves. They call themselves Tea Partiers. 75% of them wanted immigration reform. 78% of them who wanted immigration reform said they were daily Fox News watchers. The Pew folks did a study. 81% of the Democrats, 74% of the independents, 64% of Republicans want immigration reform. The Wall Street Journal, the Pew Center, the Club for Growth, the Zogby folks, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Americans for Tax Reform. None of these groups are liberal groups. None of these groups are folks that oppose the Republican Party. Some of these groups are actually standards for the Republican Party. Now, there's some myths I want to debunk before I finish. Number one, Hispanics don't assimilate. Hispanics assimilate faster than any previous ethnic group that has come to this country. And that's proven in a 2007 Pew study. 23% of first-generation people assimilate and learn English. 88% of the second generation assimilate and learn English. Crime, that immigrants create more crime. Jason Riley of the Wall Street Journal on July 26, 2013 reports a study that shows that criminal activity, that immigrants are less likely to be involved in criminal activity than U.S. citizens. Foreign-born, regardless of their legal status, commit crimes at a disproportionately lower rate, regardless of their skill because there was a conversation about whether if they were higher skilled, they would do less and it would ruin the study. Wages. It's been said that immigration reform will hurt wages, which I cannot understand, because the only way wages are hurt is when you can pay someone less than what they deserve to get because they're undocumented. Nevertheless, the GAO has actually shown how it saves our nation billions of dollars by getting immigration reform. It would actually raise wages in certain sectors. Also, another myth that needs to be debunked. Most people don't know immigrant cities create more jobs than non-immigrant cities in the United States. First-generation people create more small businesses than second-generation people. Another one that's really important to say is that Hispanics will all turn to Democrats if we get immigration reform. I hear that one all the time. This is only true if Republicans continue to use harsh rhetoric that goes beyond the policy conversation. When we discuss policies, we need to learn how to discuss them. Most Hispanic people want the border closed. Yet the way we talk about the border at times and the way we talk about a different culture is alienating individuals. Arthur Brooks at the Wall Street Journal on May 15, 2013, did a study. What we know of Hispanics who don't vote is that they're most likely to call themselves political conservatives. 61% of Hispanics that do not vote are the conservative ones. 61% of Hispanics that don't vote are the conservative ones. Our immigration rhetoric keeps folks at home. There was a period of time when Republican Protestants attacked the Catholics, and it took 80 years to recover the Catholic vote. The African Americans left the party of Lincoln, African Americans left this party about 50 years ago due to rhetoric, partly on civil rights. Today, 9 out of 10 African Americans still vote against us. In our last election, we lost Nevada, we lost Colorado, we lost New Mexico, and we lost Florida. We lost those, and if you look at the Hispanic voter base in those states, we lost them because Hispanics flipped in the percentage that they were willing to vote for the Republican candidate. Texas, if not for Tom DeLay and his redistricting, would already be a Democratic state. We need to fix our borders. We need to clean up the Immigration and Naturalization Service. We, the Republicans, need to take credit for it. And then we need to deal with issues that are important to the Hispanic community. The Hispanic community is about less government. The Hispanic community is afraid of big government. The Hispanic community is a family-based community. It is a community that doesn't like abortion. It is a community that fights for its country. It is a community that is willing to hear the Republican story. The only one of the issues, major issues, interfering in our dialogue is how we deal with immigration. My perspective, let's get it out of the way, do the right thing for our nation, and move forward and get Hispanic people into this party, so this will be the party of the majority. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. I think we're being able to see different perspectives, a lot of emotion, and very good arguments on both sides. But really, I think we got to take a look at here, for example, when we had this Republican meeting where Speaker Boehner was meeting with the Republicans, and he was laying the groundwork for this vote on immigration reform, and the party seemed to not want to move forward on it. So we have panelists who talked about moving now, and then we're having panelists who talked about not moving at all with this legislation. So I present this question to the panelists, which is, where do we find that middle ground? Obviously, we're seeing that in the midterm elections, we're focusing on, obviously the Republicans are focusing on Obamacare. They're trying to get through this midterm election so that they can win the Senate, keep the House. So why now, if the political environment is such that it's about Obamacare? We can start over with Reverend Cortez and move along this way.
From my perspective, one reason is we want to get it out of the way, as opposed to having to be competing with Obamacare. Secondly, why now? I really believe we should lead with this, as opposed to allowing the Democrats to set an agenda which is just going to frame us as being more and more anti-Hispanic. They do that job, and they do it well. They've been doing it now to the Republican Party for about 8 years, 8 or 12 years. So why now? It benefits the party now. I really think we can get it out of the way. The principles that the Republican Party have put forward are the ones we need to fight for and gain. So my perspective is, why not? If we can get the principles of the Republican Party passed and not have to deal with the Senate documentation, the Senate bill, I think that's what we should fight for.
Look, to leave it till next year is very risky politically. If Republicans don't deal constructively with the issue of immigration before the 2016 election, whoever the Republican candidate is going to have a very difficult time, almost an impossible time, to get enough Latino voter support to win the White House. And that means 4 more years of a liberal agenda of not defending freedom, small government, life, marriage, and all the issues that we care about. The other thing is, I think right now, the majority of members, and the debate has evolved. I think the majority of Republicans now in the House want to do something. But I think the majority of them are afraid. We have to educate our members and show them clearly the majority of the American people, including the majority of Republicans, like the Republican voters in primaries, don't oppose immigration reform. If you deal with immigration, it's not going to be like Obamacare. AFB, Club for Growth, the organizations that helped create the Tea Party, are staying out of this debate because many of them are supportive of immigration. You're not going to get a backlash from the base because of immigration. You may get 2 or 3 talk show hosts criticizing you, but they don't represent the majority of the conservative base.
The fact is that in poll after poll, immigration is usually last, unless they include climate change. What do voters care about? It's not up there. It's very, very low, 3%, 2%, 1%. It's not an issue that is at the top of anyone's list, including in the Hispanic community. And so I think we would probably hurt ourselves a lot more as conservatives to espouse something that goes against our principles and reduce the amount of enthusiasm and support we have on our own side if we were to do something in this area.
The polls are very good at saying, what's your number 1 choice? What's your number 1 concern? And it may be defeat Obamacare. It may be jobs and opportunity. These are things that matter to all of us. I mean, they're important. But then you say that because it's number 3, 4, 5, 6, immigration does not mean that people don't care about it. And so I think it's a bad idea to take immigration and say we'll do nothing. If there are bad ideas out there, how many of you have read the Senate bill? 4. I've read it twice, every single word of it, and I can tell you it is a perfectly horrifying bill. And so if you're going to leave bad ideas out there unchallenged, unresponded to, you're going to sit there with your mouth shut, completely muzzled, no good ideas coming out from our side saying what should happen. Doesn't mean it should be the focus of our attention, but we should lay a marker out there saying that if we were able to do something, which we know we can't with the current Senate, it either won't be taken up or won't be passed, but the House can say, this is our marker, this is what we believe should happen, and we will take care of this matter when it is a possibility, is absolutely a critical thing to do. And for the reasons that I mentioned when I spoke to you before, Obama says that Republicans have no ideas, that Republicans are do-nothing, obstructionist party. Is that how you see yourselves? So you're going to sit there and say nothing and prove Obama's rhetoric? I will not allow Obama to define me. This is an issue I want to talk about, and I hope all of you in a principled way that all all men are created equal under the law in the United States. We will not tolerate special deals for special groups with power. We are going to come out. We are going to do a simple way of making guest workers a part of America when they come, as almost every other country in the world does. We will just say you're a guest worker, make it easy and efficient. They will come across the border through a gateway because they have a way to get legal work permit. Then our border people can shut down the bad guys who traffic in people and drugs and guns, who are criminals, because maybe 50,000 will be left trying to sneak across the border, and they're all real criminals. Because the good guys looking for work through a transparent work permit system can come through that gate if they've never committed a crime, goes to our substantial security base, and if they have a self-supporting job or they take one to earn a work permit. Very simple thing, but it grows our economy and it fills our jobs. And if we sit there as conservatives and fail to state our case, I think we have let America down. It is an important issue. We need to address it in a transparent and open way. Not number one issue, but laying down a marker during this period.
I will thank you. I'll make some good points. The problem is that the House Republican leadership seems to have gone along with the Senate approach. And what they've done is, in their principles, they have all the same things that we saw in the Senate bill. You have an amnesty, plus you try to fix every problem all at once. I think our better way to address immigration overall is to focus on things, again, where there is widespread agreement. People want the border secure, they want workplace enforcement, and we want to fix the broken immigration system so those who are trying to follow the rules can do that, and so forth.
Reverend Corte.
We agree. I agree we want the border security and some of the things you said, but you keep using a word incorrectly, so I got to say something about it. Amnesty, the word amnesty, if you look it up in the dictionary, is forgiveness at no cost. In the church, we understand that because that's how you get salvation. If someone comes forward and says, I'm guilty of a crime, and then they have to pay and do recompense, that is not amnesty. No one today wants amnesty. If you have come, and I want to be clear, because our churches had to debate this. Our churches debated this. And our position as churches is, if you came into this country legally, you must go before whatever court system we create, and you must say that you broke the law. And our system in Congress, in the House, Republicans are putting together a punishment for that. So to continue to call it amnesty is to play a rhetoric game. And I think it's very important because when Hispanic people hear that, what we're doing is, once again, we're doing to a Hispanic community with the same type of rhetoric that we did with African Americans and with Roman Catholics back in 1850. And we have to learn to have a conversation where we stand by our principles, but you do not create animosity where none has to be created.
I just want to briefly say that I think when we compare the Senate bill to the very general principles articulated by Speaker Boehner, we have to be very specific. I mean, again, the principles articulated by Boehner are very general, but there are two main differences that make it completely or substantially different to the Senate plan. One, there's no special path to citizenship. And, I mean, that's an obvious difference. Second, there's an entire section that talks about looking at market-oriented guest worker programs. It doesn't address specifically what type of guest worker program, but that is dynamically different from what the Senate bill proposes, which is a small guest worker program negotiated by big labor and big business that would, when it's finally implemented, 5 years from now, we have a cap of 200,000 worker visas a year, and for construction, only 15,000. That is extremely small. It doesn't represent the needs of the market. So those are very huge difference with the Senate bill. So making a big statement like that is just factually incorrect. The other thing, which is very important, We keep saying that it's unfair to legalize people when there are people in line. This is the biggest myth of all. There is no line. We have two guest worker programs, major guest worker programs in this country, H-2A for agricultural workers, H-2B for unskilled non-agricultural workers. You know what the cap for unskilled non-agricultural worker is a year? $66,000. For agriculture, there's no cap, but it's so highly regulated that I don't know of any agriculture company, agribusiness, that uses it. That's why they enter illegally. There is no line. So this misguided compassion. Oh, poor Juan is waiting for his visa. There is no one waiting for a visa. We don't have a system that works, and we need to fix it.
Got three things I want to respond to. First of all, I think I'm using the term amnesty fairly. An amnesty doesn't have to have no conditions attached to it. In 1986, there were conditions for that amnesty. Also, in 1974, when President Ford had an amnesty for the Vietnam draft dodgers, he required community service in that case. It was still reported in the New York Times and many other organizations as an amnesty. It is an amnesty, but it's a conditional amnesty. I'm happy to call it a conditional amnesty if you want. The approach is the same as the problem. There may be some little differences, but the approach is the same. Let's try to fix everything all at once. Let's have the Obamacare of immigration. Let's do this, let's do that, let's combine it all together, let's get enough special interests together that we can push it over the line. So while there are a few differences, again, we have
major
the whole system.
There's some major, the legalization is tied to the border. To say you're going to fix the border first and somehow there's already between 10 and 11 million people here undocumented. It's crazy. I don't see how, it just doesn't make sense. The concept of legalization, having people come forward, has to be combined with the shutting down of the border. The two go hand in hand. It's the way to ensure that we protect our nation.
I would say they go hand in hand. I'd say you need to sequence it right. You have the border and workplace enforcement first in place, and then you are able to detect if it's working or not. And at that point, it might be years later, months later, what have you. Then at that point, you can address the more difficult problem. And the other thing about no line, I think that would be interesting news to those who, in fact, was reported in the media, there are many people who are waiting for visas for their spouses, for example, who are now having a longer wait because the Department of Homeland Security is processing all of the treatment applications. There's kind of a zero-sum game there. You have a certain number of people processing paperwork.
But let me explain. There are two lines here. Well, there's no line for guest worker programs, and the immense majority of them want to come here to work. Then there's the immigration line. There's a line there. But we have way too little, too few immigration visas a year. So that's why, for example, a good conservative like Senator Rick Santorum, and that's why he got an F, I think, or a D from one of those anti-immigrant groups, suggested increasing substantially the number of green cards or immigrant visas so we can get more people here legally. But that's an immigration line. The majority want to come here to work, and there's no line for workers. That's a reality.
Okay, let me add a question here. So I'm going to make a simple statement and then answer why. Comprehensive immigration reform or step-by-step immigration reform? Helen.
The place to start, in my mind, is a guest worker program. It is a way of legalizing people without citizenship or green cards, which makes it a business problem rather than a huge government problem. I think when you say, well, we'll just check up on everybody and see if they came illegally or illegally and whether they've got a job and this, that, and the other thing, you're looking at massive government. Massive government. Just like Obamacare. To get the E-Verify system working properly, according to the new Senate bill, will take 700 new workers, hundreds of millions of dollars, for something that a business that needs security issues a secure smart card for. It costs about $5. And it's got an imprint of a thumb. It has a photograph of the worker. It is easy to find out. You stick that card in the slot, you're either the person that card was issued to or you're not. And you don't need any government. It's a classic, recognized business practice. So when you're talking about we need to supervise this, we need to deal with amnesty, we need to deal with border security, more government workers, more tax dollars, putting the whole labor market into the hands of the federal government. Is that where it belongs? And so I think we have to go back. Do you know the only time we had real border security in modern times? It was during the Bracero program. The only guest worker program we ever had that worked. Now there were wrong things. There were many bad things about the Bracero program. But what happened? According to the government's figures, 1 million people were apprehended on the border a year before this program reached its peak, when it just first started. When the Bracero program, an agricultural guest worker program where people could cross that border legally with a document to work in our farm fields, 35,000 people were apprehended coming across the border. In the year after that program was curtailed, it went back to 1 million people. 1 million versus 35,000. Who do you think was left coming across that border illegally? Bad guys. Because it was possible to fill the jobs that we needed to fill legally and quickly. And the people who just want work came through properly. So we've got 35,000 border agents. If each of them caught one person coming across the border, we'd have an absolutely secure southern border. So the answer, and then there's overstaying visas. Secure work permit, you don't have it, you don't work, what's the point of overstaying a tourist visa? It's that kind of security. Come by, see, same problem. Try to go ahead, come across our border illegally, but you're not going to work in our country if you don't have a work card, a smart card, with your photographs and your fingerprints and the job you've taken. So we know that you're not on social services. So I caution people who want to look at these immigration programs. Every one of you saying, it's government. We need the government to do this. We need the government to do that. I think the private business sector can take care of their own employees with smart cards that they can scan. We don't need E-Verify. We can do it quickly and efficiently, and the system will work. And whether you've been in this country or you've never been, or you're here illegally, once you are working, once you are legalized, we know what you look like, we know what your fingerprints are, we know where you work. We don't know any of that at this current moment. You would not be able to be eligible for social services, but you would be an honored guest. That is the way to go. Let business people deal with their business community. And then if you want to punish people who have committed a crime by coming across our borders illegally in the past, say you can never be a citizen. That's what
we'll let other individuals answer the question. So comprehensive or step by step, as we're getting close to it.
Step by step at the right time, because the first step has to be being sure the law is actually enforced. So you gotta wait until you've got someone that's showing you're doing that. That's the first step.
Yeah, I don't like the term comprehensive reform. Obama has given it really that name. Obama's known for comprehensive reform because he opposes circular migration and the market-based guest worker program, which is essential to fix the problem. I like a step-by-step approach procedurally, but I think we have to, at the same time, address all the different aspects of immigration because they're all interconnected. It's impossible to do border security without addressing the future flow of immigrants to the guest worker program.
Reverend?
Enthusiastic.
Okay, we'll go ahead and open it up for questions. We have about 5 or 10 more minutes. Let's start with the gentleman with the yellow tie first, so we'll move around.
As a Californian who has seen my state transition from a state that once did strong living to a state that now gives to legal aid and lawyers, and it's very, very concerned. I've heard a lot of support for high level immigration, and yes, thanks. And once Texas turns blue, which is going to, it's over. It's not happening. In terms of the politics of it, how do you respond to the Pew Hispanic survey that came out last year that 81% of Latinos support larger government offering more services rather than smaller government offering fewer services, which is double the national average. Doesn't that seem to suggest that
Yeah, I've seen that survey, and they always mention it to me. I think, first of all, that survey is actually, those surveys are very misleading, because you're asking, do you like, they're coming from countries where there is big government. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't respond well to our message of smaller government. If you look at, for example, the statistics of jobs being created by Hispanics, they're creating companies. They're creating companies 3 times as fast as the national average. Last year, according to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, 20% of all new businesses were created by Hispanics. That shows they're extremely entrepreneurial. But let's move on to social issues. Consistently, over 50% of Hispanics are pro-life. The Barna Group, which everybody would recognize as a good conservative pollster, showed in a survey that over 60% of Hispanics believe in traditional marriage. The Gallup poll did a recent poll of party affiliation among Hispanics, and 51% said they say they're independent. Now, when pushed, they say they will vote Democratic. The initial reaction is, we're independent. We're losing them because of immigration. Immigration is not the most important issue, but it's a gateway issue. You deal with the issue, and then you respond favorably to our issues. Look, only 10 years ago, George W. Bush got 44% of the Latino vote. In Florida, we got 55% of the Latino vote. That went down to 31% for McCain. It went down to 27%. We, Hispanics, not only can vote for conservatives, they can become incredible assets to advance important causes that we care about, like small government, like traditional marriage, like right to life. But we're losing them because of this horrific narrative that many of us, not the majority, but a few, are using. Because, frankly, Herbert Walker Bush did not have a good campaign towards Hispanics like Ronald Reagan did. But you mentioned Reagan, why don't you mention George W. Bush? 44% of the Latino vote, 55%. I mean, we keep talking about what happened with Reagan during ERCA. What happened with Bush? I mean, he won because of the Hispanic vote.
But is it fair to attribute that all to immigration? John McCain, you just mentioned, actually did very poorly, but he, as we all know, is one of the chief proponents of comprehensive immigration.
Yeah.
But
when he ran for office, he said he wouldn't vote for some bill. So he did an about face when he ran his national campaign. We worked with him and we tried to get him.
And he was
I worked with Senator McCain, and I saw what happened in Hispanic communities. So I love Senator McCain, but he made a tactical error, or maybe he did, but it turned out to be a tactical error.
And he was handicapped by the ugly rhetoric that started in 2006 on immigration.
Yeah, I think the rhetoric part is very important. I think that's something that for politicians in general to understand, especially Republicans, is how they talk to the Hispanic community. That's the first step, is talking in a way where it's a welcoming message. I think is very important for the community. One quick thing here, 44% say that it's extremely important for the U.S. to develop a plan to deal with a large number of immigrants already living in the U.S. What is this plan? And keep your answer short because we want to keep going with questions here.
Can you say the question?
Sure. 44% say it's extremely important for the U.S. to develop a plan. This is a big elephant in the room. How are we going to deal with the large number of undocumented immigrants living in the U.S.? And keep it short so we can get the audience in.
I believe everyone needs to come up forward. Good people are going to come up forward. Bad people will not come up forward because they can't afford to, because they've been criminals. You use your resources to hunt down the criminals. Folks should come forward. There should be a confession that they've broken the law. There should be a set of circumstances. If you owe back taxes, fines. They need to wait for how many, whatever lines are available. They need to wait and prove that they deserve a shot at legalization in the future.
I'd like to get Helen and Derrick in.
Sure. I don't think that approach is going to work. It didn't work in 1986. The CBO looked at the Senate bill, which had a lot of those provisions in it, also predicted that wouldn't work either. So I think we have to do a different approach that will work, which is that step-by-step approach to make sure you have enforcement first.
But what do you do with the immigrants that are living, the undocumented immigrants here? What do you do with them?
I think, I don't think, I wouldn't be in favor of any mass deportation or anything like that, but I think what you do is you do step by step to make sure that you've fixed the border and that you have workplace enforcement so you don't have that pull again, and you don't have another promise of another amnesty to encourage more people to come. Once you do those things, then you can address the more difficult problems later on.
Okay, we'll go lady in the yellow, and then man in the red tie, the man with the scalp tie. Yellow, lady in the yellow. They're smoking pot in the other room, so that's why we can't hear it. Keep it short. You're like a Latin woman, you talk a lot.
Thank you. What our program is a guest worker program only. It separates migrants from immigrants. Immigrants want citizenship, migrants want work. It's about work. It is a private sector program. We suggest that employment agencies that are masters at putting workers and employers together charge a fee on both sides. They do it for the profit motive. They establish a database where all employers post the jobs that they would like to see filled, maybe leave these jobs and what the salaries are, what their work requirements are. Post those jobs maybe for 4 weeks, only American workers can apply for them. If they don't fill, then they are available for foreign workers who would like to fill those jobs and grow the economy. So that would be the private sector doing that. There would be no quotas because they would be market control. There are either jobs posted or there aren't. There are jobs empty or there aren't. So, and the work permit that would be issued would be a smart card, $5 microchipped card. The worker, if he's accepted by an employer and the match is made, has his photograph and fingerprint sent to the national database, criminal database. If that's passed and the person has or takes a self-supporting job, they get their work permit, they can come into the United States. It works for border security, it works for employers to fill jobs, it works for foreign workers who want to be here. It does not expand government, and it doesn't require tax dollars.
Thank you. Sir.
So, let's get one thing understood. You're saying, so you're from the Manhattan?
No, I'm not.
So, these two people, Reverend Lopez and the person that was in the White House, they respect you guys a lot. But your arguments are so flawed, and they're so conflating so many issues that don't make any sense.
So what's the question?
I'd just like to know, who are you advising? Are you the ones that are advising Paul Ryan and John Miller and what they did?
Are you with a specific organization?
Absolutely not.
No. Well, as somebody who's involved in an advocacy group like Heritage, and we do a lot of work with Heritage as well, on the life issue of marriage, I really care about those issues. I talk to any member of Congress that I can talk to, and I talk to leadership, and I talk to conservative members. I'm a strong conservative, by the way. No. I believe in marriage. I believe in life. I believe in, look, I'm for the gold standard. But like Ronald Reagan, unless you're going to question Ronald Reagan's conservative credentials, I'm for immigration. And this is time. Let's have a civil debate among conservatives without calling each other names. And we can disagree, but let's not start saying you're not conservative, not conservative. I know a lot of conservative members, even people. There's no consensus. There's no consensus on the Tea Party.
So do we have a question on the policy?
I'm trying to answer your question that has no substance. I'm just saying that even in the Tea Party, let's be very clear, there's no consensus on immigration, against immigration. The big consensus within the Tea Party is against big government. I know a lot of Tea Parties who are for immigration. I mean, you may not like that, but it's the truth. Are they less conservative? Are you going to say Paul Ryan's not conservative?
No.
Sir, 1 second. Reverend Cortez, do you want to respond?
No.
Okay. Go ahead.
These two, I'm totally for the Heritage Foundation focus. These two, the things they said and who they are is good in many ways, but they are all like false arguments that are built on the wrong.
Well, I think the beauty of the conservative movement is the fact that we can come from different parts, come together and have this debate, and that's why we're having this immigration panel. And that's why we bring on people like Derrick from the Heritage Foundation, Helen, Alfonso, Luis. These are guys, and I've got to tell you, I've known several of these panelists for a long time. They have studied this issue inside and out. They have worked this issue year after year. They know their numbers. So again, let's continue. I want to get some questions on the policy itself. Sir?
I have a moral question, actually, but I think that's very important. I was struck by Helen Kriebel's statement that we don't want an immigration policy that's Republican. We want one that's really, truly American. And actually, there are a lot of precedents that we can look to for this policy. One of them would be the 1924 Immigration Act, which restricted immigration to Northern Europeans. You could actually go back a lot further, and you could look at this next 1790 Naturalization Act that restricted immigration to free white persons of good character. And I think the motive for all of these acts was really Americans understood the nation as an extended family, and that they wanted to choose people that they had something in common with, that they wanted to value their own over others. Do you find that immoral? Do you find this American tradition, really, of valuing your own people, European Christians, over others, to be immoral when it seems to be so much a part of America?
I would say we should welcome immigrants from every country around the world. I don't think it's a good idea to have quota systems per country. I don't think that's a good policy. It's Kennedy's policy from the 1960s. And I think that the great thing about America is anybody can come here and become an American. It's hard to go to France and become French. It's hard to go to Japan and become Japanese. Very hard, in fact, to go to Japan and become Japanese. But you can come here and become an American, no matter what your background is. And so I actually, we've had shameful immigration policies in the past where we limited just Chinese, for example, in the 1800s. And so I don't think it's a good idea to pick country by country or anything like that. I think it should be open to all.
The rest of the world does this. India does this. I mean, we say
and I would agree with that, and I would refer you, talking about American tradition, to George Washington's letter to the Jewish community in Connecticut, where he says, we don't expect you, you're not going to be discriminated because you're Jewish. The only thing we want from you, expect from you, is loyalty to our political principles and for political institutions. That's what America's all about. It's not about, yes, we have a Christian tradition that we cherish, that we value, but it doesn't matter where you're coming from. And by the way, if we are concerned about the cultural decay in the country, it's not blaming the Mexican immigrants or Central American immigrants. These people are religious, these people are pro-life, they're pro-marriage, they can become assets in the fight for our culture, which is the #1 challenge that we have in the country right now.
So we have 3 more minutes left. Sir with the raised his hand right now.
That's it.
Yeah, I'm from North Carolina, and my particular area has a strong tradition of African American group, and the Republican, all old school Democrat, African Americans are all Republicans. And I cannot tell you how strong that support that you're telling is. I see us losing Latino work groups in terms of the Republican. I really feel we lost African Americans in that regard, and I am scared to death about losing the groups that are supportive of family values, church-going people to this issue. Growing up in Texas and seeing Republican Latinos and losing that because of the dialogue, I am fearful we're going to marginalize the Republican Party. I'm scared to death. So I just cannot express more of what you're saying, and notwithstanding the comments about how we can't see a correlation and how we're not going to remove individuals become Republicans because they're Latinos. I think the Republican Party is strong enough to be able to get people of good character, regardless of whether they're Latino or Indian or whatever. And so I think the traditions of those Latino folks really strongly support us. And I am scared we're going to lose. So I don't know how to say it strong enough, but we need to keep saying that.
Thank you. We have about 2 more minutes. I'd like for some closing statements now, so I'll give you all about 30 seconds. Helen?
I think it's important to remember that a guest worker program should be the cornerstone. It's an easy program to do uniformly across the board for anybody who wants to work in the United States. It should not be quotas, it should be private sector, it should not be government run. We don't need more government, we don't need to pay more taxes.
Thank you, Derrick.
All right. I would say I'm pro-immigration, but I'm against an amnesty policy. And I just want to read a great letter that George Washington wrote right after the Revolutionary War. Very quick. The bosom of America is open to receive not only the opulent and respectable stranger, but the oppressed and persecuted of all nations and religions, whom we shall welcome to a participation in all our rights and privileges, if by decency and propriety of conduct they appear to merit the enjoyment. That's why legal immigration is good and illegal immigration is bad.
Alfonso.
Look, I believe that we have to deal with this issue on principle, but obviously there are political ramifications to this issue. I think that we can build a winning conservative coalition. Latino voters are the Reagan Democrats of today. Let's embrace them by dealing constructively with this issue, and we will build a strong Reaganite coalition that will prevail in the next decades.
Reverend.
I wanted to say you met some kind of other amnesty. But I do want to say the thought that it's pandering to Hispanics is a mistake. We have an immigration problem. There are 11 million people here. We have to figure out what we're going to do. We're either going to chase them down and put them out of this country and spend billions doing it, or we're going to find a way to recruit them to what we want and make them fix their status, make them become legal, and give them the same opportunities that every other ethnic group that has come to this place called America has gotten. We can do that, and I believe that a majority of them can actually be members of CPAC in the future. Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much for coming and being part of this wonderful debate. Thank you, panelists, for the respectful dialogue. And let's get a solution